To be honest, there's not much video or podcast that discussing on the local startups ecosystem in the sense of depth. But once we found of one or two, it is similar to what we saw that prevailing in LinkedIn. That is, announcement of achievement to justify the presence of the program or so on, that kind of thing. But if our ecosystem is really as wonderful as that it presently to be, why does something still feels off for some of us? So I'm decided to make it a series, which the goal is to from several aspects, unveiling the mystery of Malaysia's startup ecosystem. For this episode, the very first episode of the series, our discussion will rely on the policymakers part, which is the VCs, policymakers, and operators in Malaysia. From who's the big player on the field to what they execute and what's the downside. Every end of the podcast doesn't mean we get an absolute answer for any kind of doubt. So instead, I see this as a series as a discovery process, like what is supposed to do at the previous episodes. That is, from and hold a teaser through while inviting discussion in the comment section below. As we push the progress of making this series together, I believe we will get the picture clearer from the chaos, hence more near to the truth. Let's dive into it. If you rewind Malaysia venture capital story, it actually starts from a very industrial place. In 1984, the Malaysia venture capital industry was formally established with the creation of Malaysia Venture Center Berhad, which appeared to be the first Malaysian VC firm, with a fund size of approximately 13.8 million as a starting point. Yet, the first funds wasn't chasing software, they were chasing steel, assembly lines, semiconductor packaging, which kind of any kind of tangible goods rather than tech startups. The early venture capital vehicles of the 1990s behaved more like manufacturing expansion funds that raised capital for ideas. They mirrored the country's economic landscape and the era, the days, measurable fields such as export-led and factory-centric. Fast forward to 1999, the sector has expanded to include 30 registered venture capital companies, with total assets of approximately 1.7 billion and community investments of 1.4 billion. However, venture capital represents only 0.1% of total financing sources during this period, with 70.8% of investments concentrated in the manufacturing sector rather than technology-driven enterprise. This has led the urgency of creating innovation bursts, along with government recognition of the importance of VC playing their role for economic development. A national report lands on the Ministry of Finance desk in 1999, basically saying, we need to accelerate this, or we are not playing the future game. Hence, the state enters the game. In April 1999, a comprehensive report on enhancing VC financing in Malaysia was submitted to the Ministry of Finance, highlighting the critical need for accelerated funding. Budget of the year for the year of 2000, which announced on the October 1999, drops half a billion ringgit into the VC financing, which is the first real signal of intent. And most importantly, this is where the settling approach to the startup ecosystem plants. Then comes Malaysia Venture Capital Management, Berhad, market in 2001, which a government-backed vehicle especially aimed at high-tech investing. This is the moment Malaysia moved from experimenting with VC to architecturing it. So fast forward and we look through the 2000s era, we could see the sort of institutions stack on institutions kind of phenomena. We have Credit Fund emerged in 2003 to back early tech ideas. We have NDV emerged in 2002, which is the same born year with me, pioneering venture debt, and venture tech in 2009, focusing on high-impact sectors. Malaysia becomes the first in Asia to regulate equity crowdfunding, which indicates that the country aimed to formalize alternative capital markets early and legitimize new financial roles beyond traditional banking and VC. Then we have P2P financing. Then startup-focused public listing routes like the Leap market in 2017. So fast forward again to the early 2020 when the COVID first hit to the States. At that time, stimulus doesn't just support businesses but it funds them as well. Panjana Capital launches a fund of funds model in 2020, pulling in private capital alongside public money. This is no longer just funding startups, but this is funding the fund manager also. By 2021, the government wants orchestration, not just capital. So they cut off with the Super 2021 until 2030, which represent the national startup roadmap. Here, we thanks to the worldwide paradigm shift as well, where more people get exposed to this kind of intangible goods kind of business, as known as the tech startups. Then my startup emerged after that, served as a single window to stitch ecosystem together. In 2024, which is recently, KL20 Summit happens. Ambition spikes, fund scales, order softens, we get national funds of funds under Khazanah National. We have Dilawan Capital to seek the next generation of fund managers. We have golden paths for VCs, unicorns, founders, and to attract talent from overseas. We have original capital packs that worth billions in ringgit. We have tech incentive, resource, fund manager pipelines, innovation builds, matching platforms, and AI roadmaps. And this year, the intention is loud and clear. Malaysia doesn't want to participate in the startup economy anymore. It wants to host it. So, laser arc, from manufacturing first VC in the 1984 to policy-driven VC in the era of 2000s to ecosystem engineering in the 2020s, which is where we're at now. So now, we've got the timeline. Let's peel back layers. Throughout the whole briefing of the timeline-based story of Malaysia VC ecosystem, it looks at the pre-phase at least, our government and big authority are contributing 200% of effort to shout out for local founders and make the ecosystem better across the time. It is a big safety net that constitutes of a lot of big players, entities, and programs. It is ambitious, well-intentioned, and painstakingly structured. But something feels off. There's a smell, maybe for someone, can be sensed obviously. Yes, it is a smell of bureaucracy. As we can see, the big portion of who's playing the game is corporate operators, policy architects, and committee-grown decision makers, but not any builders that forged by assets or company building scars. It is full of coordination rooms, approvals, and committees. In short, it is the sense of a system optimized to deploy capital and launch initiatives, not one optimized to create founders who returned as an investors, operators, or public intellectuals. And that's where the deeper pattern begins. Malaysia's startup ecosystem, at least so far, didn't grow from a cycle of founding a company, scale it, exit, reinvest, become a mentor, and repeat. It grew from plan, allocate a fund, Doing the announcement, deploy the fund, measure dates, and do the planning again. There's a fundamental input missing in the first equations. The this, the founder who has built something real, live through the chaos and see it, and then reinvest their scars and it sinks back into the ecosystem. When you lack enough of these people, predictable consequences show up. That is, no one has built a local benchmark for what great look like. No one comes back with asymmetric conviction to fund the next wave. No one trains the next generation with real operator DNA. And without a homegrown prototype of success, there is no internal magnet keeping the talent here. That's why we're facing the brain drain. So, the system does what any system would do when it lacks domain operators. That is, it fills the gaps with the only available talent pool, the professionals who are excellent at institution building, frameworks, governance, corporate executions, and product design. But not startup builders, not asset-driven investors, not people who survive 0 to 1 and come back to tell the others where the landmines are buried. What happens next? Corporate experts is the only choice to steer, and they are usually the ones who are very good at allocating budgets, structuring initiatives, benchmarking other countries, forecasting targets, altering roadmaps, issuing grants, and measuring participations. They are not the ones who live in the brutal feedback loop of the market and saying, your product is irrelevant, fix it or die. That difference is invisible in the policy document, but it becomes extremely visible in outcomes. This is how you get an ecosystem that is good at building stages, but not yet good at producing the headliners. You should start from the premise that the ecosystem was mostly steered by the corporate experts instead of founders. Then honestly, the next chapter is kind of predictable. Because with that classic corporate management mindset, and way too many backends plug in at the same time, the misalignment of incentives must be show up sooner or later. Imagine that you are having different types of authorities playing the game. A few genuinely want to make the ecosystem better. Some of them just want to take the box and justify contributions, and someone simply want to sit on the headlines and look good. With all those possibilities instead of having a clear, shared intention of let's actually make the ecosystem better, in consensus way, but instead we started taking consideration of variables that less related to the success. We start chasing the quantitative measurements, such as the number of programs, the number of state-linked entity, sort of things. You name it. As a result, we always see the step 3 as a starting point rather than accomplishing step 1 and 2 that helps build the momentum and foundation before going for the big move. Why? Because step 3 things always provide such illusion that we are building something, we are in the right path, while step 1 and 2 always the most tedious task could have been done due to it requires diagnostics the problem from the scratch. Consider carefully of every variables that could lead to every possibilities. And the job is to find the most matters variables, building the right funnel to lead to the desired outcomes. In short, you will get less applause and a sense of accomplishment in completing a task by step 1 rather than step 3. I'll provide some evidence here. Take our founding architecture for example. We built fund of funds through entities like Penjana Capital and later Jelawan Capital, designed to back VC managers. That is capital supply, backed with the assumption that the bottleneck is not enough investors and not enough money to fund at the same time. But at the same time, we either have enough venture grades startups graduating from seeds to Series A. This is the truth. let alone Series B. So let's say we solve who funds before we solving who received the funding. This can be justified with the data illustrated the total committed fund, the actual deployed amount and number of deals that has been done for each respective year. So I have the data with me here. You may have a look on this video version of podcast in YouTube for visualized data if you are listening this now through Spotify. But I will still roughly go through the important numbers for Spotify listeners. So throughout 2020 to 2024, the total committed fund wandered in the range of 4.2 billion to 6.6 billion, and the actual deployed fund wandered in the range of roughly 200 million to 380 million. This represents a 4.07% deployment rate of the fund, which it is a catastrophic underutilization of available capital. Imagine you have roughly 5 billion ringgit in cash as a fund manager, but you just deployed maybe 300 million out of it. It is kind of waste. Most importantly, the data signal two things. First, the scarcity of the deal flow. This refers to the insufficient high-quality founders team that's investment ready and scalable startups to absorb available capital. Second, that is the willingness of VC to taking the race, despite government backing, selecting larger checks in fewer deals. But the first signal is the most deadly one, and it is kind of a chicken egg kind of questions, where so long as we didn't build that talent pipeline from scratch, the capital will still stagnate. We put the discussion of a funding besides. We look at the ambition signaling. We announced unicorn targets under Super 2021 until 2030, and aiming for 5 unicorns by 2030, which is less than 5 years from now. But again, without freezing deployment disciplines, founder quality, program design, and the root of tenant formation, I honestly don't think we get anywhere near that target in the next 5 years. And in fact, I'm not a big fan of setting the unicorns as the main target, as startup can be overvalued sometimes given that the nature of valuations. It depends on the investor willingness to pay at a particular moment at a certain stakes. So in conclusion, it is subjective. I don't think any country should say we want X number of unicorns, but by no means I'm also not against quantitative metrics. Rather, they should seek as the natural outcomes. If you solve the real problems, understand the monetization risk, and commit to the long-term growth, unicorn status is just a matter of time. So instead of just counting the unicorns, why not just talk about figure out the globally scalable product market fit from Southeast Asia? Number of unicorns are not the KPI we aim for directly. Instead, they are the downstream effect of compounding startup density, repeat founders, and exit cycles. But here, we want to declare the destination before building the route. Let's talk about also the capital attraction layer. For another example, the Golden Pass, Unicorn Pass, and expedited visas for global VCs are tools to pull in international capital and talent, and for the founders as well. Maybe this is a good one, a good move, but at a certain point. But so long as we didn't manage to make our ecosystem attractive, if I'm foreigner looking for home base for my startups, why don't I just choose Singapore for better environmental support? Globally, mobile capital move for one reason. That is, it can plug into existing momentum. Silicon Valley didn't get good because the capital arrived. Capital arrived because founders and mentors were already there. Indeed, the ecosystem itself creates a track. So here, We deploy the magnet before creating the magnetic field. Alright, let's wrap for this part. In a nutshell, none of these moves were irrational, but they were prematured. Not failures at all, but missequencing. Because when the system is designed by administrators, the first instinct is to enable motion, which include of launch the schemes, allot capital, create the programs, announce the targets, and name it. But the quiet work that actually creates an ecosystem, which is the founders building rapidly, the teams scaling painfully, the market's scale being captured incrementally as it's recycling talents. That part doesn't fit nicely into a rolled out calendar. Another problem that having this kind of system is the velocity of iterations. As we can see, the backend is congested everywhere. We are nurturing and forming the culture where consensus decision is a must, level by level, within a hierarchy. Rather than accepting specific information, shoot the market and iterate from there. I know someone will probably come up with, but KL has moved into the top 20 emerging startup ecosystem globally this year. Well, the ranking measures the activity, funding volume, programs, events, and policy output, not in regard to the founder quality, repeated assets on sustainable venture compounding. You can easily reach top 20 by building the stage, not necessarily by producing the actors. This all regards to what kind of mindset we should apply in the first place, and the past background is playing a crucial role here. If you don't believe what I mentioned about the mindset, just simply go to the YouTube and search some of the few interviews that has been done by them in the past, and listening carefully whether the expression is a lot of buzzwords and mystifications, or it is a good response backed with scientific reasoning and facts. So now that we've broken down the timeline, the structure, and the missing ingredients, let's talk about what this means for founders and for people who are standing outside the ecosystem but still cheering for the theater version of it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that is, if you only look at the announcements, the headlines, the policies, the big stage moments, we will get a very misleading picture of what actually drives progress in a startup ecosystem. Theater is loud, real work is quiet, and if we are not careful, we might end up celebrating the noise instead of understanding the signal. For founders, the first lesson is very simple. Don't build our expectations around the theater, build it around the markets. In Malaysia, it is easy to get caught up in programs, grants, accelerators, pitch events, recognitions, and mainstream endorsements, you name it. All these things that feels like progress but may not move the needle of our company. Programs are not product market fit. Funding announcements are not revenue. Policy documents are not the customers. And visibility is not the validation. If we rely too much on ecosystem architecture, we'll overestimate how ready the environment is to have a swing. The truth is harsh but important. That is, we are still in the early stage. The infrastructure is getting better, yes, but the founder density, the repeated asset wisdom, the operator-led mentorship, those things are still thin. So our real edge as founder today is not the ecosystem, it is our ability to operate independently of it, to build something that survives from the open market, not just something that survives from government oxygen. Because here is the pattern in every strong ecosystem. The best founders didn't wait for the environment to get perfect. They built anyway, and the ecosystem caught up later. For outsiders, the casual supporters, the lagging cheerleaders, the people who love posting Malaysia Boleh, every time a new program is launched, here's the lesson. Don't confuse activity with isolation. We should absolutely support local progress as a Malaysian, but support with clarity, not blind optimism. When we celebrate every initiative as if it is transformative, we create noise that drowns out the real problems founders face. Cheering for theatre makes the ecosystem look healthier than it truly is. And when outsiders reward noise with attention, the system produces more noise, more announcements, more KPIs, more big stages, and the likes, but not necessarily more great startups. So, the healthier mindset here is, especially if we are not in the trench, is to ask better questions. Instead of asking what program did they launch, try to ask what problem does it solve. Instead of how much funding was allocated, ask how much was deployed. Instead of which unicorns are we targeting, try to ask what PMF do we have that could scale globally. Because if we don't change the questions, we wouldn't change the outcomes. Another important question lessons is the founders should not wait for permissions to be ambitious. Malaysian ecosystem sometimes sends the mixed signals that is, behold on one hand, not be safe in the executions. But not great founders was produced from comfort. If anything, scarcity is the best teacher, and it forces clarity. And for people outside the ecosystem, don't romanticize the idea of startups. It is not glamorous. It is not a straight path. It is not that Instagram version where everyone drinks coffee and brainstorms on whiteboards, having those friendly chit-chatting that make everyone feels good. The real work is lonely, messy, and unsexy. Respect the process instead of celebrating the theater around it. This leads to the last point, that is, the ecosystem becomes strong only when the market becomes the judge. Not committees, not programs, not KPIs, and where founders are judges by customers, by revenue, by retention, by expansion, by those crucial indicators DAU, MAU, and that is when we will start seeing a shift. If we keep rewarding theater, we will get more theater. If we reward real work, we will get real outcomes. So, the lesson for everyone here is founders, outsiders, policymakers focus on the fundamentals. Look past the announcements and pay attention to what compounds, not what trends. And if we keep pushing these directions, even slowly, the ecosystem, I believe, will eventually evolve from stage building and to producing the actual headliners. And that is when Malaysia truly enters the game, not as a participant, not as a host, but as a producer of world-class companies. I hope from this episode, I could convey a message that we shouldn't too happy or excited on those moves and announcements. In fact, we should observe it in an analytical, neutral way. Before I call it a wrap, please bear in mind that what I've said in this episode is just a part of the iceberg. In the next episode and the upcoming episodes, I will discuss about the cultural dynamics in our startup ecosystem among the VCs and the startup founders as well, backed with some reliable data. And it is a crucial one as it will manage to answer that bureaucratic move in the lens of quantitative layer. So I will call it a wrap now and see you in the comment section below.
It's a wrap.